Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Conscious Living Show. My name is Patricia Hamilton, and we interview people that are making a contribution towards expanding consciousness in all areas of life: spirituality, health, ecology, and other areas as well. And today I've got the pleasure of interviewing Andy Green. Welcome, Andy. Andy is the author of a beautiful book called Being, Experiencing a Numinous Reality. And it's a massive book. I'll just show you a picture. And it's so rich and so deep that I thought we could start to delve into some of the aspects. But before we do, I just wanted to give you a little introduction. Andy is a philosopher. And it's in the true meaning of the word philosophy. He's a lover of wisdom. And he pursued philosophy at university, where he completed a degree. However, he found academic philosophy very limiting, as he was after an experiential understanding of living. He further explored realms in healing, meditation, natural medicine, and mental health, in order to experience the oneness of being. Andy continues to teach meditation, Tai Chi, and Qigong, and he's a director of the Wu Wei School. So this is his first book, Being, and I believe there's another book on the way, but we're going to just get started today with having a conversation about some of the aspects and messages that are coming through in this amazing book. So welcome, Andy.
Thanks, Patricia. Yeah, it's great to be here. Very honoured. Perhaps I'll start with what my journey to actually be writing such a book and all that. It really comes out of, I was quite depressed and anxious as a young man. I was 19, going on 20, and I had to do something about my mental states and all that, and so I was just about to see a psychiatrist and thought, no, I think I'm going to fix this myself, and so I bought a book back then called Relief Without Drugs by a famous psychiatrist in Australia, in Melbourne, Ainsley Mears, and he had a practice in there because he'd actually, I think he'd studied over in India, and he brought meditation to Australia. Really, it was back in those early days. And I read that book and I started immediately doing these practices, and it was a very simple practice, just progressive muscle relaxation with nothing fancy. And then sitting for a while, and I started to notice the effects immediately. Like immediately I seemed to be able to gain some measure of calm. Mm-hmm. I was already studying at university, and I was quite disillusioned with being in what I perceived as a sausage factory of knowledge. Mm-hmm. And I could write clever essays, but I felt like I was playing a bit of a game here. So it led to me dropping out. I wanted to have some experiential understanding of, what the meaning of life was, why were we here, what in the hell I was doing. So I continued my meditation practice, left university, started traveling up the East Coast, stayed on beaches for 6 months, just living on beaches and doing lots of meditative practice. And all the while it was deepening, all the while. And I was starting to get some feeling of clarity, and a bit of a separation from the mind, because I'd realised I'd been attaching to mental phenomena, to thoughts and emotions as well. And this was not necessary. And there was something else going on. So I could feel this deeper, and I can only describe it as a vibrational feeling throughout the body and around, and that developed further and further, and it kind of fed my curiosity about what, you know, true spirituality was, you know, and I was always a bit of an outsider, you know, so I was engaged, you know, like with Buddhism, with yoga, with and staying often in places where that was happening, but never, if you like, attaching to the group as such or any belief structure, but just continued meditating and inquiring and had some, I suppose, what you'd call profound energetic experiences, you know, of the Kundalini and all that sort of thing. So there was some kind of, in a way, kind of otherworldly experiences.
Was this when you were already practicing like Qigong and Tai Chi?
Actually,
you had these experiences?
Before I started Qigong and Tai Chi. My first practices were more in the line of yoga, so doing yoga asanas, but doing a lot of sitting practice was my mainstay. And you know, I was just sitting quietly in the room one evening, and then all of a sudden there's this whoosh, you know, this energy just classic came up the spine and you know, filled with light and all of that sort of thing. It's quite, whoa! How do I stop this train? It was just like this avalanche of energy, just and it was quite was sort of wonderful and disturbing at the same time. Because
so how old were you when you had that experience?
I was 22 and I was up in Brisbane. I was actually staying in a place called the Dharma House, which was one of those stopping points for people coming from the south, going up to Chenrezig Institute up in Queensland.
Queensland, yes.
Yeah. So I was in Brisbane, and Chenrezig was up in the Glasshouse Mountains, I think it was. And that all happened, and has continued.
How long did that experience last for? Do you remember?
Oh, well, that was the very powerful. I think it was basically the event itself didn't actually last that long, as an extreme experience, but the after effects have continued ever since. So, 22-year-old man to now has continued the awareness of a different energy inside and around the body through everything. So that's continued. But I was in a state of an alarming state of bliss for a few weeks after that, where I just I didn't need to talk to anybody or anything. I was just in this bubble of bliss, and I was staying at the on West End, it's called, in Brisbane. It was a lovely spot by the river, which, you know, went through the terrible floods recently, the last couple of years ago. And I was actually up there 2 years ago and visited the house that I was in. I'm still there with my wife, Kavisha. We'd been to this marvellous West End market, and I said, let's see if we can find that house, the Dharma House where I was staying. So it was there. So really the background to the book, Experiencing a Numinous Reality, is from this experience of meditation and life opening up at a different level that is behind the writing of the book.
You know what, Andy, just if I could say, I've only read about maybe a quarter of the book, because it's so rich. But, you know, I did get, you know, that transmission of the energy behind the words is coming through, which is obviously coming through from the consciousness that's coming through you. It's definitely coming it's coming through the words that you're using.
Well, I'm pleased to hear you say that, because you know what I got to do? I did go back and finish the degree that I was in. I was doing a double major in philosophy. No, there was a philosopher that I did find quite inspiring, and I connected to at university, which was La Trobe in Melbourne. And I'm still in touch with him. And I got to show him the book. I gave him a copy to have a look at. And he was rapt. I couldn't believe it that all these years later he said, this is the book that I would have liked to have written as a young man. But he was engaged in being a lecturer and all that sort of stuff, and was part of the I suppose, establishment, in the philosophical world, academic one rather. But it was really good to get that feedback from my old philosophy lecturer to get that.
So he recognised the because he didn't go down that path, because the academic world is separate, isn't it? It doesn't.
You have to be very careful, because he was the subject I did with him, which I particularly enjoyed, was philosophy of music.
Wow.
His lectures, well, not in the lecture, but in the tutorials, he would do these sound healing practices.
Wow.
He would hold us to not speak about, because it was forbidden for him to be doing this. Because in an academic institute, it's not supposed to be doing anything experiential. Otherwise they get into trouble. So back then he would have, for example, he'd studied Chinese medicine as well already. So it's not your usual sort of, I suppose, academic in that way. And he would get you to lie down, and one by one he'd get a bell. He'd ring the bell over the chakra areas, get us to notice the resonance with each person of the different sounds in relation to the person's system, how they were energetically.
So the bell was ringing according to the vibration of those chakras. Exactly. Yeah.
And he was using Aboriginal rhythm sticks to do healing practice on the meridians. This is way back in 1980. That'd be 1985, I think. Yeah.
Gosh.
85 at university. Can you believe it? And I was really impressed with this sort of stuff. And
you know what? This reminds me just of one thing, talking about academics, because I studied Asian studies at university, and the book that I loved the most was Lao Tzu, the I Ching.
Yes.
And later on, I did a course I was at Curtin University with Paul Stang, who was studying. He was a teacher of Indonesian culture and philosophy. And as part of our course, he asked us to study this particular mystical group in Indonesia. And then he said, look, I want you to go and find something similar in wherever you are and write up a thesis, a report around it. And so that's how I decided to study the Rajneesh group.
Okay.
And it went from being a student of it to becoming a disciple. So that's how I got involved.
Okay. Yeah.
So I get that, like maybe that's the danger. That's why they don't really want you to practice these mystical practices, because then you leave the academic world.
Yeah, and also, well, it's outside academic experience in a way.
It is, yeah.
It's non-conceptual knowledge. I mean, it's knowledge. It's just not in the conceptual frames, and so he was often having to, be quite careful and about what he was doing because of that. But I was so pleased that he got to
So when did you actually start writing the book?
Well, that was a long time ago too. The book took about 15 years to write, but it was rewritten a lot during that time, and a lot of editing. you know, and because it was so big, and it's really, you know, 2 or 3 books in the one, and a lot of the material as well was pulled out, and that's the book I'm working on now. So yeah, 15 years, I'd say.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I had a 2-year break when I met my wife. I couldn't write anything for 2 years. But I've got a like a few here, so just everything stopped.
So you also along the way got very involved with Qigong, didn't you? And you've trained with, did you train with in China with any
I have
masters?
trained in China, but I'm mostly training here, training different masters in those arts, Qigong and Tai
Did
Chi.
that have, I mean, I was just interested because, you know, you're quoting the Lao Tzu and the philosophy of Taoism. Has that had an influence, do you think?
Oh, of course. Yeah. And the Tao Te Ching is one of my favorite books. I think that's absolutely amazing book, you know, and whether it's written by, because there's not anything really known much about Lao Tzu, but it could have been a few people all put together, you know, we don't know. But it's a great legend, and that story of him writing that book when he's trying to leave to go to Tibet, and the guard asking him, you know, I'm not going to let you go unless you write down what you know.
I don't know that story. What is that story?
Well, the story is that he'd had enough of being in the court. I think he was supposed to be in his 80s, and he's done with his duties, you know, and whatever. So he's leaving. He was heading out the east gates to go to Tibet, and the guard at the gates stopped him and said, "I'm not going to let you go to write down what you know." And so, okay, that's how he wrote the book. And then he kept going. And they call him the purple mist. Sorry, heads west. The purple mist heads west. And when Kavisha and I were up in the Wudang Mountains, which is a place where Tai Chi actually began from Chengsung Feng back in the 15th century. There's a temple there dedicated to Lao Tzu, and in the temple, in the courtyard, there's a beautiful mural of Lao Tzu, and he's riding on the bullock, and he's sort of balding on top with streaming white hair, back, and the caption underneath, it's in Chinese, but we had it translated, says, "The purple mist heads west."
Beautiful.
So we refer to as purple mist. Not even a person. He's a mist.
You can just visualize it just floating, you know.
Yeah. And it's a marvelous image, and I did get to take a photo of me in a classic Tai Chi pose next to that image. So,
yeah. Well, because Tai Chi, you know, I did a little bit of Tai Chi when I was in Pune, and it is just so, it is such a pathway, isn't it, to merging and being one with the elements. And so I can see that is very complementary to what what you've been bringing forth.
Tai Chi is the harmony, you know, not only harmony within you, because you actually practice what are called the 6 harmonies, which some of them are physical, so, you know, shoulders moving with your hips, elbows with feet, hands with feet. There's 3. There's intentionality through the third eye point, the chi field, and there's physical force, although there's not much in that particular slow form. But the 6 harmonies are about you getting in alignment with all natural forces, really.
Wow, there's so much to cover, but I wanted you to read the beginning of the book, because I think that really says it all. I don't know if you've got the book there. I can read it if you don't.
Yeah. Page.
Part 1.
So chapter 1.
Yeah, the frontispiece to part 1, where you talk about awareness.
Awareness is our experience of consciousness. Yep.
And maybe you can talk a little bit more about that, because that to me is, I mean, that's really the theme of the whole book, isn't it? And you just express it so well.
Awareness is our experience of consciousness. Without awareness, there is no curiosity. Curiosity drives us to find our identity. But sometimes in the process of this investigation, we can experience unanticipated challenges to our sense of who we are and what is real. This is when our curiosity pushes us beyond what we have known and what we have come to believe is real, where our awareness has expanded beyond parameters that we know. Here, habitual modes of thinking and beliefs must be left behind in order to apprehend the new. So if you like, there I was sitting quietly in my room as a 22-year-old man, and a bit dazed and confused about life and whoever I thought I was, and then had this energetic experience, which really was a sense of the new. I've never had such, I suppose, profound energetic awakening. And essential in that was this a feeling of consciousness being potentiated, so that everything, if you like, is consciousness, but this was a particular awakening of it, if you like, in the human being. And I really, in a sense, could have been anyone. It was just this human being sitting there, and this was unfolding. So all I could do was witness this, and that sense of witnessing is really so important, because we get so hooked into experiences rather than experiencing, so hooked into our thought structures rather than the consciousness behind and between them. You have a thought, it stops. Space, what is that space? You don't stop existing when thoughts have stopped. There's consciousness and existence is there all the time, regardless of whether there's thought there or not. Yeah. But we attach to the doings, to the mind. So if you do, some, like I do, I suppose, what I call a all-inclusive practice, which is just to be. Really, meditation, depth is just being. So whether or not someone talks to me or not, it doesn't matter. I'm still in the meditation. So it's not like a withdrawing
process.
It's more a process of just being. And the quietness just happens by itself, because you're not attaching to the mind. So you're not feeding the mind. You're not doing a specific practice like a breathing practice or they're fine. And I do energy circulation practices and all that sort of thing as well. But in the deeper, what I consider the deeper meditation of just all-inclusive being, you're just witnessing whatever arises. And it could be conversation. It could be a thought coming through. It could be nothing. It could be sensation. It doesn't matter. So the thing about that sort of meditation is it never stops. Your moment-to-moment existence.
That's true. And the other chapter that really touched me was about impermanence, and because that also relates to you talk about welcoming impermanence by resting in awareness.
Yeah.
And you're quoting the Buddha: everything changes, but nothing remains without change. It's, I think people have ideas about, you know, what impermanence might mean, like death or not being attached to, you know, having relationships coming and going, and material things coming and going. But I think that what I was touched by was, sorry, that's Bimby talking in the background.
Part of the conversation.
Was, you know, that story about the farmer who has a horse, and then one day the horse runs away, and then, you know, everyone says this is terrible, and then a few days later the horse brings other horses back, and then the neighbors say, isn't this fantastic? And then something else happens. But so basically the farmer is constantly saying, well, you know, this could be good or it could not be good, you know, let's wait and see.
Yes.
So it's like really staying in that awareness, that presence of things are always changing, and not to get attached to whether it's right or wrong or good or bad.
Exactly.
It's just simply the way it is.
Yeah. And we want to develop anti-fragility, which is a concept used by Nassim Taleb, but it's a really important concept. You're fragile when you're dependent. Like, you know, for example, I can only meditate if I'm in a really quiet room and it's special conditions, or I've got a special cushion and da da da. Well, you know, that's a very fragile approach to meditation. You know, and if the metaphor goes deeper into your life, that if you're just welcoming whatever arises, things are not, you know, like if you welcome whatever arises, then you become anti-fragile, because you're not dependent on it being a certain way. You know, like dependent on that person to make me happy. You're not dependent on that, you know, so that you really, it's like just a deep relaxation, and that deep relaxation brings a certain power, a certain strength, because you kind of not, you know, going around on eggshells trying to make everything perfect or control everything, because you see, ultimately the intelligence of life is really controlling everything, and that you just have to pay attention.
Yeah, I always think of that analogy of the bamboo, you know, blowing in the wind, and being flexible, no matter what weather or storms or wind. There's a bending, but the integrity isn't lost, you know, it's not damaged because of the wind. And that resilience, you know, that having that inner connectedness to what is infinite and unchanging is the real source of our strength, isn't it?
Yes. And at the same time, one of my favorite sayings is trust in Allah, but tie up your camel first. Really important saying, because while you're connecting to the infinite and to the absolute, and that's the in a way the ground of being, you do not deny the relative. You do not deny how important and the place of the relative. You know, in Buddhism they call it the two truths. You know, there's absolute truth, but there's also relative truth. That there is this natural duality that we experience. You know, we look at a tree. You know, we call it having a name. It's in seamless being. However, there's a relative truth. There is a tree, and that you're a human being. And that's where you know, respect for science also comes in, because science is a very good expression of our natural tool-making capacity to use thought in that way, in a very precise way, so that it's part of our equipment in a way, and science is part of that natural equipment that we have. So you know, I love scientific knowledge. You know, I really enjoy science, But at the same time, I'm grounded in what I see as the absolute, which is outside all of that. You know.
Yeah, that's what I love about how you've put this together. It's like you brought together, you know, the intellect and, as you say, science, together with the real truth of behind what is consciousness itself and the experiential nature of that, and the love and it's so inclusive. It's like a book for our time, you know, which is really to bring those two worlds together.
Yeah.
They have never been, I mean, how could they be separate? Because it's all part of the one anyway. But
yes. Yeah.
it appears on the external, when we look at the phenomenon of it, to be separate.
Yeah.
So people live in that, you know, argument, which is not really valid because it's everything comes from perception anyway. So
correct.
but I think this is such a good book for our time, you know, because so many books, they could be very spiritually engaging and awakening, but then people are often led to leave behind, as you say, not tethering the camel, their needs, you know, in the physical world.
Yes, yes.
And they think that to be spiritual is not to have money, perhaps, you know, to to live a certain way, you know.
Not much. I was never good at that. Never good at making money. And always to survive and stuff, but never.
Yeah. But I think this is just so vast, and it's kind of like it encompasses everything that really, and what we're moving into now, this new era. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about, because you've got a chapter on the new age towards the back, what your take is on the new age and the spirituality that's emerged, you know, in the last, 20, 30 years? And whether that's valuable or whether it's led people astray, or what's your take on it?
Okay. Well, I think it's a bit of a mixed bag because, you know, unfortunately, you can see many what are called misadventures in the new age as well. And I've been centrally involved in, you know, because I've worked in natural medicine and you know, even teaching Tai Chi, and I was a yoga teacher as well, and all that. I think whatever people do, because you see, there's not in it. A lot of what's called New Age is really old age, but it's just wrapped up, and it's still just all this commercial packaging, you know. And that's old age stuff. That's like you know, just people want to make lots of money. I'm just going to write this book so I can make lots of money. I mean, God, that certainly was not a motivation of me writing this book. Like, you know, not that many people probably buy it because it's just, you know, it's too big. It's, you know, it's probably quite challenging in some ways, some areas, but yeah, I think it's because sometimes I feel the in the new age not necessarily respectful, particularly of Indigenous people's stuff, and so there's a bit of appropriation of things that goes on. So because I talk about the commercialization of things, as though we've still got a capitalist ethos in the way we try and package and sell spirituality, you know, and that's a bit of a problem. So I think they've been my main concerns, you know, like when that book The Secret came out, for example, like that was a classic thing in marketing. Like, oh my God, you know, it was kind of insane.
Yes,
and everybody jumped on it. It was this sort of this new flavour, and it had been specially packaged, and it was a secret, so people could have this secret, you know, and okay, something new about this, and it was even incorrect. The whole thing was because you I mean, the whole thing about resonance was not properly explored in that. You know, resonance where you connect to things and they have a resonance. I mean, how do you get that resonance? You don't get that resonance through just following a belief program or training yourself like an ideological sort of thing. So it was really like a bit of a mishmash of stuff that was pretty irrelevant, but it was commercially very successful.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
To me, just part of that capitalist sort of conditioning.
Andy, I'm just going to pause for a minute because, so in relation to the New Age, I think also one of the risks and dangers is a lot of people get, they follow leaders and teachers on pathways that lead them into rabbit holes. And there's a real tendency to follow, to rather than using your own, intelligence to make your own inquiry and explore.
And there's definitely a role for thought in that, the role of thought in asking a question like, am I really genuinely experiencing this, or is this just someone said and I'm just believing it, So that's the place of active intelligence, and you inoculate yourself if you are individuating. So you can be in a group or whatever, but if your identity is found in that group, you're not individuating properly. So individuating is that inoculation of intelligence. That means you're questioning, you're curious, you're open, but you're not going down rabbit holes of belief or conspiracies or whatever, like these are all in the landscape. But people who go down those rabbit holes, unfortunately, it can become quite deluded, and just believing all sorts of stuff that has no basis.
Yeah, and you talk about that tribal consciousness, don't you? And that distinction around being part of a group which is very nurturing and important because we're social animals, but at the same time not identifying your identity with that group or that tribe.
Yeah, and I don't you have to, and I don't think I did in that book, but I certainly am in this book, differentiating between like a tribal, a connectedness, and I'm in the tribe of sapiens, if you like, just the largest tribe, and I have friendship groups, of course, and all that sort of thing. That's a bit tribal too. But then there's ideological tribalism, and that's a very dangerous thing. And that's what people can tend to identify with. And, it can be cultish, it can be political, it can be partisan. All of that sort of thing to me is actually quite toxic. If we want to develop as global citizens, which really is our inner heart before all programming, we're all global citizens. But we must move out of any ideological tribalism. That's very destructive. Yeah.
So with what's happening at the moment on the earth plane and in society, what do you think, or what would you recommend for people? What's the best advice you could give people right now?
Really good question. Okay, I'd say the first thing is to really listen to your heart. Like, really to find your heart and listen to it. And that requires deep listening. That's not just bit of, but it's actually quietening enough in your mind to listen to the heart. And the heart will show you what's true in a person or in a situation or a way to go. Listening to your heart actually takes quite a bit of going into, because you're basically learn how to get out of your head. Because in traditional cultures, and I'm thinking particularly of the American Indian culture, the heart is the keeper of the spirit. And there's some great quotes. I know there's a great quote I read in Jung about this fellow in early, I think it was in the early 20th century, interviewing an American Indian guy, and he said, "What is it with you Western people? We can't quite understand you. You seem to be so driven, always restless with desire to. We just don't quite get it. We don't even think, so many thoughts like you guys do. Like our thinking comes from the heart, and I think it's an important thing that we've got distracted with. There's so much mental busyness that's actually not necessary, for a good functioning life. But we're in hyperdrive mentally, and that's, a lot of it's useless, and negative, particular. It's not. There's too many what ifs, and I should, and all that kind of stream of endless things. And to start to listen to the heart will spiritually is the way, not just really for any human being. Because when you say, "Who am I?" that's the place you say, "I'm so and so." This is the centre of being, if you like.
And that is enough, and we don't have to kind of justify ourselves or have a point of view or align with a certain group in order to know that. Whereas, like you say, the tendency has been that people get pulled out to have to prove themselves or identify themselves in a certain way, which leads to a lot of leads to more unhappiness and confusion.
He wants more. Your dog wants more.
Well, Andy's going to be a speaker at the Conscious Living Festival, and you're going to be launching your book and talking a little bit about being, and also you're going to be demonstrating and doing a Qigong activation on the Saturday on the main stage, which will be really beautiful. And also you're going to be part of the Empty Sky Cosmic Cabaret event on Saturday, demonstrating some Qigong martial arts. So you're going to be available also for people to have a chat with you at the festival, and you'll have the books available there.
Correct.
On sale. And do you have a website for the book itself?
No. That's coming, but it's no.
So whereabouts are the books available? Where can people buy them?
Oh, well, you could pick it up. Well, if you come to the festival, you can certainly pick one up from me. But also they're available on the. You can order it from Booktopia.
Booktopia, yes.
From
Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon, Book Depository, all of those.
Oh, fantastic!
When it came out, I had no idea. My daughter rings me up. She says, "Dad, did you know that your book is on sale at Walmart in America for $35 US?" Oh, idea. I didn't even know it was in America. And she said, yeah, I just looked it up. It's on sale at Walmart for $35.
Wow. There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
Wow, that's well. When you do become a published author, I mean, you create a footprint, don't you, in the Akashic records as well.
Totally.
And your book will live on, in the digital world forever.
Such as
probably.
It is. I had to, when I was writing the book, as I said, one of my favourite philosophers is Lao Tzu. And I thought Lao Tzu's book has been one of the most powerful and influential books on the planet. I want to write something, not on the calibre of what he did or whatever, but and it's certainly a different type of book, but I wanted to have a sense of the timeless about it. so that
Yeah.
it's going to be relevant to human beings, not just of this time, but any time.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's really true. I mean, that's the hallmark, isn't it, of truth, really, that it doesn't really change at all. So I think you've really done that. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Well, the next one's called The Way of the Global Citizen. So, and that's
fantastic.
And
Yeah.
that's very well. It's, you know, there's lots of stuff about this time in it, you know, that we're in, and all the craziness of that, but nonetheless, hopefully relevant to any time.
Well, I certainly think like it's a time for deep exploration and searching and facing up to our truth.
Yeah.
As never before, because we can't avoid it anymore. There's no escape, really.
We must take responsibility. That's the whole thing about being a person, a civic person, connected to everyone. We have to take responsibility for being here. Yeah.
Wow.
You listening, Mr. Morrison? wants to escape and not go to the climate. When I planning on not going there, for real, like
I know.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. No, it's kind of beyond. You just can't really fathom what goes on in their minds when they're just obviously so not present, so not really aware. But I guess that's for us now to wake up and be aware and responsible in our lives, because
hold you know, each of us and everyone accountable to the situation.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Andy. It's been just a delight. You just really bring me into my heart and you just make me laugh. It's just
That's good.
It's such good medicine.
Yes, absolutely.
So I really encourage everyone who's been tuning into this interview to get a copy of the book and to come, and if you're in Perth and you can come along to the festival, come along, meet Andy. And I think this is a real treasure that is available, and it will go on. You know, it's a tool for development and expanding your awareness. I think that's why it's so valuable. It's not an easy read, but it's a developing, very expansive process, and you won't be disappointed. And I often just read a chapter and it just takes me into that space, you know, that expandedness of being, and it's very uplifting and really strengthening to have that experience. So thank you for writing the book, and look forward to the next one.
Thanks, Patricia. It's been a pleasure to chat with you. Yeah.
Thanks, Andy.
I look forward to seeing you at the
festival. Yeah, absolutely. And stay tuned, everyone, for our next interviews coming up, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the festival as well.